Pretty good. My name is
Yeah.
Will Vargas.
Hi, Will.
I am Jeannie's grandson. So we're both. That's Milo. You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Milo Hoffman,
I'm
and I I just like help with CoastPride.
Yeah.
Like I've been involved with it
We're both
since the beginning.
volunteers for
Yeah.
CoastPride.
okay.
So
Cool. Well, I'm Soozi.
here, let me
It's
go.
nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
All right. So we're just gonna ask you a few questions
Okay.
about this time and the quilt. Let's see. So, our first question that we have for you is, what was the meaning behind the design of the quilt made by your family in honor of your brother?
That's a good question. It reflected his life, the things he loved. He loved opera. He loved ballet, the beach, the ocean, nature. We used to call him Nature Boy. He loved his family. So it all reflects that. One of the panels has one of his ballet shoes on it, signed by different dancers. One of the panels has a lot of the operas that he appeared in with the San Francisco Opera. And then my brother and sister-in-law, who live here in Florida on the beach, they did the big wave because our brother Peter, he used to come out here to Florida and, be on the beach all the time. He loved it so much. And then he loved the mountains. We scattered some of his ashes in Muir Woods up there. So it was just, and the tree, the family tree, my mother did, our mom did. It was all her children that she did little apples on the tree, you know.
Nice.
So yeah,
Nice.
that's the meaning behind it. The center panel, actually, Peter was also very much into metaphysics and things like that. And he designed a whole bunch of beautiful tarot cards. And the center panel is his son, the sun card, that has his birth and death dates on it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what it all means.
Milo?
When was the last time you were around the quilt?
Oh, it's been a long time. My mother and I had a dance studio in Foster City, and we used to do a recital every year at San Mateo High School, and we would display it in the lobby there. The last one we did, I'm going to say, was, oh gosh, I'm old, I can't remember. Wait, let me think. Probably 90, somewhere in the 90s, like 90, 94 maybe, somewhere around there. Yeah, that's the last time I saw it. Yeah.
All right, nice. Let's
A
see.
long time. Yeah.
What is something that you will never forget from this time?
From when we made the quilt, or from his death, or just the whole AIDS epidemic?
The making of the quilt.
The making of the quilt. Mostly that it was very sad. And talking about it brings that back. It was very sad. It was a very sad thing to do. It was a nice way to remember him. And I had already seen the quilt where did I see it? At Moscone. It was shown at Moscone in the city. And I don't remember if I think it was before Peter died. I can't remember. So I was already familiar with the quilt. And I had already had friends who had died of AIDS long before I even knew my brother had it. So yeah, most of that time, it was just a very, very sad time. It's the way I remember it.
What was your personal experience like going through the AIDS crisis? Like when it all happened, when it hit, when your brother passed?
Well, I have a lot of personal emotion attached to it because, of course, I lost somebody I loved very much. But I was a dancer, professional dancer in my career. And so I also knew many young men who died as well. People I worked with, danced with, you know. I worked in Las Vegas, and the first person I ever knew who died was a really beautiful dancer named Bryant McGivern. And I remember hearing about his death, and it really shook me up because up until that time I didn't know anybody, right? And never in my wildest imagination would I think that I would lose my brother to it also, you know, because that was probably 2 or 3 years before Peter was diagnosed. And it was just, it was a really, I keep using the word sad because it was a really sad time. And then when Peter died at UCSF, at University of California, San Francisco, I don't know what they call it today, but back then that's what it was, UCSF, in the AIDS ward. That's where he died. And there were so many young men dying there, and we would go to visit him. When he was diagnosed, he had been intubated. He had pneumonia, cystic pneumonia. And so he was diagnosed, and they diagnosed through his sputum that came out of the ventilator. And my brother was very, very lucky because he was a dancer with the San Francisco Opera. So he had great insurance through the AGMA, which is the American Guild of Musical Artists, which is a union, a theatrical union. So he had great insurance. He had a family who loved him dearly, who was there with him all the time. And yet I would go to UCSF to see him, and in the AIDS ward, there were so many young men whose families had disowned them, who were there alone, who were dying alone. So it was very yin yang. It was very sad, and then there was a lot of I don't want to say hope, but there was a lot of love also, you know. So anyway, that's what we lived through for quite a few years. I was working in Las Vegas when Peter died, and it was a job that I took that I wasn't quite sure that I wanted to take because I didn't know how close he was to death, you know. So I was gone when he died, but I flew home immediately, of course. And then the other thing I remember vividly was when he was cremated. And Peter was beautiful. He was such a beautiful man. He died when he was 32. And he had very long limbs. He was a beautiful dancer. And I remember this is my humor. My family, we're all we have that dark humor in us. You know, we went to pick up his ashes at the Neptune Society, and there was this little box, you know, on the table. And I kept thinking, how did his long legs fit in there? It's like, you know, those are the weird moments that you're just like, wow, you know, it was just so sobering and so, wow, you know, because that was it. His beautiful life was in this little box, you know. So those were the things that I remember from that time. Yeah. And then we did release his ashes into the sea here in Florida. And that was, we opened them years later. It took us, I don't even know how many years. Christopher might remember that. But when we opened it, I had forgotten all the things that we put in there with his ashes. His California driver's license was in there. There was all sorts of little notes and things that we wrote to him. So it was, and then that was the final memory of all of that. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for sharing
You're
that.
welcome.
Let's see. I have one more.
Okay.
Did you or your brother ever experience any discrimination around AIDS?
Oh, a lot. Oh, absolutely. Peter was working He was augmenting his dancer income at the Liquid Experience. I don't know if it's still there. It was a liquor store on Haight Street. And he got shingles. He got a really bad case of shingles on his arm. It's before he was diagnosed, but he had already suspected he might have it. And he was fired because he got shingles, and the guy who owned the place assumed he probably had AIDS, and so he fired him. So some jobs that I worked that I would share with people that my brother had AIDS, they were afraid to be around me because my brother had it, right? I was doing a job in the Bahamas in Freeport, and there was a young girl. I came upon a conversation, and she was telling all the other dancers not to go in the hot tub because they would get AIDS. And so I told them, that's not true. I said, my brother has AIDS. I said, before I left him, I even kissed him on the cheek, before I left. I said, that's not true. You can't get AIDS by going in the hot tub. So a lot of that kind of stuff, I put up with a lot of that. And we experienced it for sure.
Milo?
And then there's just one last question, which is, if you could go back, would there be anything you would change on the quilt, or would you just keep it the way it was?
On the quilt, yes, of course, because it was an artistic expression, and in art, when you re-examine it, you always see something else, right? So yeah, maybe, probably. I don't think we would have changed the concept because it referenced the things he loved in life. But maybe choice of fabric, stuff like that, Maybe we would have done it, maybe my panel, I could have sewn it better, stuff like that. But I think we would have definitely, I would keep it, the concept, what we did. Yeah, I wouldn't have changed that part.
Cool. Great. Well, this video is going to be, I think it's going to be showed in the center for CoastPride. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to interview your brother as well.
Okay.
And we're going to go ahead and combine the two. So I just want to say thank you so much for, helping us out with this and answering all the questions. We really appreciate everything.
Well, I'm choked up, but I want to thank you both, because to see such young faces embracing this is very, very touching and very important.
Yeah,
so I thank
of course,
you both.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Right.
We appreciate it. Have a good one.